Hello and welcome back. It's time to put this Showa damper together. The parts have been inspected, cleaned, anodized, zinc plated. New seal kit has been procured. O-rings are new. Everything we need is in place. And I have already fitted the U-bush and seal kit in the head and installed all the O-rings. I figured if you got to this point and if you sat through the other videos, you're proficient enough to put all that back in place. I don't need to show that, and I get on with the important thing. So I've got the body here, and I start by putting the adjuster back in. It's all prepared, put together, new O-rings, and now we have to get this, don't forget this little steel shim, it goes down the bottom. So I just insert that, make sure it's in the right place. There's a recess for it, so there we are, all in there. Adjuster, it's all greased up. I use a silicone grease. I know it works. I'm sure other greases are fine as well. I use silicone. And get this back in there. Yep. That's that. Then next thing is the gas canister. Try and remember which way around it goes. This way. It doesn't really matter. It's symmetrical. It's just for the sticker. Just push it on. Again, your O-ring is already greased. You have to push it on and find the right snap ring. It's this one. Okay, that's it. I have to ensure the adjuster is out, which it is. Next thing, I'll put it in the vise. And fit the damper tube. It's been re-plated, zinc and gold passivate, and the O-ring is already installed. Again, I put a little bit of grease on the, actually I used some copper slip on the threads here. The O-ring's already greased up. Just to stop the thread seizing. I think copper slip's probably better than silicone. Bit of silicone on the bottom where the O-ring goes. There we go. I don't put Loctite on these. I don't think it's necessary. If anything, it's going to make it worse. I've never seen one come undone, so just screws down. Here's the friction ratchet again. I'm just going to nip that up lightly. I'm going to fully tighten that a little bit later when I have the seal head back in. I don't want the tube crushing, but it's all the way down. It's the O-ring is going to seal, so I can just carry on now with the job. Little grub screw can go back in. Just this tiny grub screw goes down there. again, just nip that up really, doesn't need to be tight at all. I'm just going to get an Allen key for that. Ah, that's the body done. Put that to one side. Let's get the shaft. Shaft, needle valve. Again, grease it up. And put it in. Just pushes in. Right, now I've pushed that all the way down. I'm going to push that bit up again. You can see it's sticking out the bottom. And that's when you push it in, that's where the path for the oil opens up, and the more you push it in, because it's a little taper, the more oil can pass. I want to leave that open, so I'll just have it like that. And got the nut, which has been replated. Screw that on. And the adjuster's already in there. It's in the fully open position. And I now I kept the bung out for the moment. I've made a new bung, goes in here, kept it out for the moment because I want to see where this needle, how this needle touches the, as and when, actually I can see it in the bottom when it starts pushing it down. That's where it starts pushing it down. That's where it wants to be. Let me open this a bit more. I want maximum opening on the needle valve. And see how many turns we get. It's a little bit fiddly to get it set up, but you can, I've got the adjuster all the way round out, and now I can start winding it in and see if that needle closes all the way. Get as much adjustment as possible. That's perfect. I can now also set my bung. There's a new bung I made. I'm going to put a bit of Loctite on that. So now the adjuster is all the way in. I'll just set this bung so it's touching the adjuster, like so. And now I've got a stop for the adjuster. I can wind it out, push the needle back in. Perfect. Now, there's the bump stop rubber. Put that on. And here's the seal head. So I push that from the bottom up. Reason being, the threads in the top of the shaft are the same diameter than the shaft, and I don't want the threads going through the new seal. Now there's a bit of a sharpish lip here, so you have to kind of be a bit gentle with it, and maybe use a pick to help it over the lip. That's it. And then this is actually just a dust seal on the outside, so that doesn't do a lot, but obviously I don't want to damage it anyway. And the actual oil seal is tapered in such a way that this is the way it wants to go on, so that should easily just slide on, and it does. Just move that up a little bit, and I'll put it in the vise, and I'll tighten up the lock nut. That's nice. Right, next is the piston assembly. And go back on. So I've got all the piston shims still on my tie wrap, so I can't mix it up. So I'll cut that open and just start feeding everything back on. All the shims. I've looked at all these, I've cleaned them, I've done everything to them, so and now I can just throw them back on. There we go. There's that. I have a new lock nut. For those of you who've watched the first video, the original shaft is sort of peened over to keep the nut in place. The K-Tech seal kit does come with a new lock nut, which doesn't seem to want to go on now. Let's see. 35 Newton meters. That's what I use. That is kind of the torque for these. Check it's correct. Yeah, 35 Newton meters. There we go. Done. Nice. And there's all the shaft assembly back in one piece. Right, back to the body. Now this step would be slightly different if we were using the original bladder, but as some of you may recall, the bladder was damaged. You can get them from K-Tech, and if somebody is interested how to fit it, bleed it back together with a bladder is slightly different, but I can answer that individually if people are interested. I made this piston to separate the air from, or the gas from the oil, which I think is a much better system anyway, and it helps massively with this next step, bleeding the body and canister. So there's my piston. I've put a thread in here, 6mm thread, could be any thread, doesn't really matter. It has no function other than for the next step of bleeding. So I'll push this in, push it all the way down, and going to put some oil in it. The oil I use for all damping is Silcoline Pro RSF, or it's actually changed its name to just RSF. In this case, it's 2.5. Comes in all kinds of specs: 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10, and so on. You can mix them. They're different color, but that's just a colorant. You can mix them. So if for whatever reason you wanted a 3.5 weight oil, you could mix an amount of 2.5 and 5 until you get the ratio you want. This is 2.5, which is the spec that's recommended for this damper, and I'll just pour that in the body and fill it sort of 3/4 of the way up. There we go. Don't want too much in it because when you put the shaft in, you have a lot of displacement from the piston and the seal head, and so don't put too much in to start with. You can always top it up. Now the reason I like a piston setup is I've got the adjuster fully open, so the path between the body and the gas canister is now as large as ever going to be. I can now just wind in a longer bolt into my piston, and there's obviously the bottom here has now got air in it because I've just trapped it with the oil, so I need to get the air out. and I do that, I can now, via this bolt, I can pull up the piston. Let me try it this way. And that will suck in oil, and I can push it down and some air bubbles are coming out. I try and capture that a bit there. Very difficult for me to capture that. You'll have to take my word for it. So I'll do that a few times. I'll pull this piston up. Which draws in oil into the gas canister, and then by pushing it down, it pushes the oil back and also air comes out. I'll do that a few times until I can see no more air bubbles coming. Still air coming. Oh, and we have a leak. Not what I wanted to see. Let's see if that was just spillage or if there's a leak. Definitely a leak. Okay, it's from the adjuster. So I'm going to have to look into that now. So leak fixed. It was the adjuster O-ring. Somehow it didn't seal. I put another new one on, and that one's fine. So we can carry on with bleeding. I've done a bit. So just do it a couple more times. Pull the piston up. Push it down. I don't get any more air bubbles on this side, so that's good. I'll do it one more time just to be sure. Pull it up. Push it down. No air bubbles. So I'm very happy with that. So now I've got the piston. What I want is I want this piston all the way down. And I can now fit the valve cap. I've got no valve in it yet, so just down enough so I can get the snap ring in. That's in. Now I'll just fit a valve cap just to hold it so I can pull it up. It would also come up with pressure when we pressurize it. I'll make sure that sits nicely, as it does. Alright, now I can fit the valve. It's the valve in. I can now pressurize the canister. I'm going to pressurize it with 8 bar. I'm going to use air for now because I have to dump it again later, and so I'm going to do that now. See if this works. Doesn't really matter at this point if it's 8 bar or 6 bar. I just want some pressure in there. All right, that's worked. So add some pressure in there. Screw on the cap. Right, now we need to bleed the main body piston. I'll put a bit more oil in. And I've got the adjuster all the way open, and I've made sure the valve's pushed, the needle is pushed in. If you don't push it in, it doesn't come out by itself. It does when the damper is together. If you turn the adjuster the first time it goes into compression, the pressure will push the needle out. The gas pressure might even do it. But of course, the gas pressure now is not acting on this side at all because this piston in there is bottomed out. And that's exactly the way I want to have it. So, as the needle's open, this bleeds very easy. You just push it in, and I can now top up the oil a bit more. Up to the groove where the snap pin goes, roughly. And I'm slowly pulling it out. I want to make sure that the holes in the shaft stay covered in oil. Push it down quite forcefully, which forces any air that's trapped under the piston, forces it out. It goes through the center of the shaft, and it also goes from under the shims because you probably start lifting them a little bit. Just let that sit there with the piston at the bottom for an amount of time, so any air bubbles at the top don't get sucked back into the other side. They need to burst first. It takes about 30 seconds. I want to do this a few more times, so I'm going to pull it up fairly quickly after pushing it down. I can see some micro bubbles, so I'll push it down again, and I'm going to leave that. I walk away and leave that for a few minutes. So I'm back. It's pretty much bled now. There's no more air bubbles coming out. I'm going to top the damper up a little bit more. There we go. I'm going to push it down one more time. It's nice and smooth now. So now I'm going to slowly pull it up. And I want the top of the piston assembly to be covered in oil at all times, but to be just below the groove where the circlip's going to go in a minute. I do that because we need to push the seal head down, and to do that I want the piston actually higher than it ends up sitting in the damper, so I don't trap air between the piston and the seal head. Oil's going to come out the top. I think there's a weep hole somewhere. It's probably going to squirt at me in a moment. So I'm going to wrap some cloth around it to catch the oil that's going to come out, because as you push it down, oil comes up the side of the seal head, pushes all the oil out until the O-ring starts touching the body. And as long as oil is coming out before the O-ring touches, you're going to be fine. If there's no oil coming out, you haven't got enough oil in there, you need to put a bit more in. I don't want to get too much oil in, because otherwise lots of oil is going to come out and it's just going to make an almighty mess. So I think I've got it in the right place. So I slowly push this down, and there's oil coming, and now the O-ring's touching the body, and I've had a nice amount of oil come out. So I know there's no air in there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump the pressure of the canister again, because now I need to push this down, and in order to push this down, no more oil can come out because it's now sealed. So the oil has to go through the body and into the gas canister, and especially as I have to push it down a bit further than it will be sitting, so I can get the snap ring in. So I'll push this down, and there we go, it's in. And just, oh, I need to keep dumping the pressure. Best to take the valve out actually, because if you don't, I've got the top of the damper now covered in oil. And I need to keep pushing that in. So I'm not pushing the shaft in, I'm pushing the seal head in. Shaft needs to stay at the top. Otherwise we haven't got enough oil in there afterwards. Almost down. So I need to push it a bit further than the groove, so I can get the snap ring in. We're nearly there. I'm struggling to push it with my hand now, simply because my fingers aren't slim enough. Let's see. I can see the groove now. So snap ring in. It's a little bit harder than expected, I'm very honest. Okay, now it's in. Now I'm going to wipe out all the oil. Now, a lot of people will clean this now with brake cleaner or similar to get it all bone dry. I don't like doing that because I quite like the tiny bit of an oil film in there, because it just stops it from seizing up and corroding again. So I'll wipe out as much as I can, but instead of with a slightly oily rag, if you like. And I'm happy with that. So, valve back in. Right, I've actually realised I forgot to put the bump stop cap on when I put the damper together. It's easily sorted. I'll just take turn it upside down now, take the damper top off. Right, I want to remember the position of this nut, so I'm going to leave that where it is, so I can measure it, so I get it back in the same place. So that is 11.7. That's good. So take the nut off, bump stop off. Right, I can now also tighten up the body fully because I've got the seal head in. Let's give it a nip. Perfect. Nip up the grub screw. Bit of copper slip on this cap, just held in by friction. And get a rubber mallet. Nice, perfect. So now what I can do, it's also quite a good check. Let's put it back to 11.7. I'll leave the bump stop off on purpose for the moment. 11.7. If you have too much oil and not enough gas volume, you won't be able to push the damper in all the way. Something I want to check, because I have converted it to a piston canister, and the piston may well take up a bit more volume. Just want to make sure I've got enough. So that's back on. So I gas it up again. That piston shaft came out nicely. So two things to check. One is with the gas pressure, does the damper return to its fully up, fully extended position? If it doesn't, you could air in it, and it does. And does it push all the way down? If it doesn't, you have too much oil. And this goes all the way down to the nut. And now it should return by itself. It's a very slow return, but that is because I don't have a lot of pressure in it. So this needs gassing up to 8 bar, and nitrogen is the gas that's commonly used. Now, the only reason nitrogen is used is it's cheap, cheaper than other gases that come bottled. The important thing is it is dry. Although I question the importance, because for the amount of air you've got in there, even if there's some humidity in there, which will cause it to expand more with temperature and increase the pressure more than it would do if there's no humidity. I know it doesn't have to be nitrogen, because I used to work in Formula One, and nitrogen got banned because we used nitrogen in the tires for the same reason, because if you use just air and the humidity content of the air changes from day to day, so your tire pressures when the tires heat up changes every day, and that's obviously really, really bad in that environment. So, but they banned it, and it got banned anywhere on the car, so we had to use air, and we just used dried air. So we had a compressor system that would ensure that there's no moisture in the air, and so you can use air as long as you know it's dry. If you've got a good water separator, air is fine. I've used air a lot, and it's fine. Anyway, I'm going to go and take this to my friends who's got a dyno, and I'm going to show that as well in another video. And he's got nitrogen, so we're going to gas it up to 8 bar with nitrogen, and then we know it's right because they say use nitrogen, so we do. And this is really it. I'm going to take the top eye off again, put the bump rubber on. I've got the last little snap ring. This snap ring goes on there, and then we've got the spring platforms. That's it there, and we've got new. This is all nicely re-anodized, and I've got the 4 bushes to go into the bearings with new O-rings, anti-rotation O-rings. But that's it. That's how you put a damper back together, how you bleed it. That's how I do it, and hopefully it was helpful to some of you. And if you have any questions, let me know, and if there's any interest, I can put the list of O-rings and where I got them from in the comments below. Let me know if that's of any interest to you. And thank you for watching. There's going to be one more short video with the dyno and the graphs. And that's it. Thank you.